Welcome to Michigan Justice Advocacy's Legislative Lunch and Learn. And my name's Jack Wagner. I'm serving as the president of MJA. We're glad you're here today, and we're excited about the information we're about to share. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that we've all been shaken and rattled in light of the very recent events just a few miles east of here on MSU's campus. So I hope that you and your families, your friends and colleagues and loved ones were not directly impacted, but I pray that for healing if this has been too close to home for you. So our hearts go out to you today. So we have 5 speakers lined up for today. They're going to provide a variety of perspectives on the topic of fair chance hiring and the connections between employment and social policies for people with a criminal record. First, let me thank my friends at Safe and Just Michigan. They've contributed to the lunch buffet, so we appreciate that. And I'd also like to point out in the back, you're going to find a paper from our friend David Gunther from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He's left copies of a very compelling research paper which reveals the link between education and reduced recidivism rates. So you can pick up a copy in the back. Also in the back, you're going to see some artwork that has been done by the incarcerated citizens of the state. They've donated it to us, and we're auctioning it off. So if you'd like to help out, take a look at that artwork on your way out. Okay. I'm going to start with some numbers. So the problem of mass incarceration in the U.S. has resulted in over 2 million people currently being held in prison today across the country. Here in America, we imprison more people on a per capita basis than any other country in the world. So for every 100,000 people, we lock up 629 of them. And this puts us at the top of the list, ahead of such countries as China and Russia and Iran. In Michigan, there's approximately 32,000 individuals in custody in a state prison here today. Additionally, there's over 40,000 people on parole or probation, according to a recent report from the Michigan Department of Corrections. And these numbers don't take into account those individuals that are held in one of our 83 county jails awaiting trial. So according to a recent report that I read from Safe and Just Michigan, there's an estimated 2 to 3 million people in our state living with a criminal record right now. And there's a good chance that many of these people in this room probably know somebody with that, one of those 2 to 3 million people. Actually, you may be one of those people. And if you are, if you're in here today and you've been previously incarcerated, I just want to recognize and applaud the accomplishments that you've made in your life to get this far. It isn't easy coming home from prison, finding housing, finding a job, and figuring out how to get back and forth to work from home. It's even harder to go back to school and get an education to better yourself if you have a criminal record. So I just want to recognize you today if you're here and you've accomplished that. It's no small feat. All right. So today we want to explore the connection between sensible social policies to reduce mass incarceration and policies which seek to put people back to work after having paid their debt to society. Michigan Justice Advocacy is involved in the work of advocating for legislative changes which incentivize individual progress toward personal rehabilitation while serving time in a Michigan prison. We have seen the introduction of our good time policy, both in the House and the Senate last year, and we're on track to have those policies reintroduced again. But if enacted, these kinds of policies could make available a talent pool of skilled workers ready and equipped to give back to society and prove their value to society, having learned from their past mistakes. And the good news is that there are several willing and eager business leaders who have learned that fair chance hiring can result in having some of the best, most loyal, hardworking, and willing employees that are helping their businesses grow. So today we're going to introduce you to several key speakers who will share much of the background needed for this 102nd Michigan legislature to consider and enact smart, justice policies. This will be a rather fast-paced meeting because, like as I said, we have 5 speakers, and I'm going to work to give every one of these speakers as much time as they need. So let's get started with our first speaker, Jayshona Hicks from the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for allowing me to join you here today. I want to share some information on our labor market, our educational attainment goal, and also tie it in to really highlight why we should include justice-impacted individuals in our policies when we're talking about Michigan's economic recovery. So just a little bit about myself. Again, I'm Jayshona Hicks. I'm the Student Success Manager of the Office of 60 by 30, which is housed in the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. A little bit about our department. The governor, she created our department with a mission, and it was simply to expand economic opportunity for all. And prosperity. Our vision is to make sure Michigan is a place where people, places, and communities have the means to reach their fullest potential. And within the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, there is the Office of 60 by 30, where I work. And our mission is really, all of our work includes meeting the state's educational attainment goal, which is to ensure that 60% of our Michiganders, working age adults, which are 25 and older, have the opportunity to get a post-secondary education, and that's like an associate degree, a skill certificate, or beyond. We'd like at least 60% of our Michiganders to have that by the year 2030. So pretty much our work is centered around that goal. Right now, we're at 50.5%. As of today, when the governor first championed us to meet this goal, we were at 45%. So we are making progress, but again, we're looking to meet that goal by 2030. And so as I mentioned, with our attainment rate, Michigan is at 50.5%, and this is a report or a stat from the Lumina Foundation report. And you'll see that there's other states, their stats, and again, Michigan is at 50.5%, which is a little bit below the national average of 53.7%. And so you may be asking yourself, why should we care so much about educational attainment or just meeting this goal? And it's because the data is very clear. Higher education levels are associated with better economic outcomes. So you'll see those who have a high school degree or less, they have a higher jobless rate. Those who have a post-secondary degree, they are participating in the labor force at higher rates. And it's the same in terms of poverty levels. Educational attainment levels are also associated with poverty levels. The more education you have, the less likely it is you are living in poverty. And then again, we're going to go with the annual wages. The positives, it doesn't end with the poverty levels. University graduates earn more than twice as much as high school graduates. So you'll see as the education increase, the median annual wages also increase. And so just some key points in terms of our labor market to think about. Michigan's labor market has seen steady improvement. Right now, I think we're at 4.5%. Which is a little bit above the national average of 3.4%. We have seen steady improvement, but have not returned quite yet to pre-pandemic employment levels. Multiple groups continue to be disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and that is people of color, people who have a lower education level, or most importantly, are justice-impacted individuals. Those groups who were already disproportionately impacted by our state policies, our criminal justice system, they also fared out worse in the pandemic. And so as we think about the economic recovery, we also need to keep those vulnerable populations in mind. And so when we're thinking about the labor market, and also that there are jobs that are opening jobs, and some people are just not going to those jobs, we need to think about who should we engage. And so one key population is the justice impacted individuals. In 2021, there were over 32,000 people in Michigan prisons, and then a little over 8,000 were actually released. And according to MDOC, those that leave prison, they have an employment rate of 30%, but if they actually participated in a vocational program, that rate actually doubles to about 60%. So this is just insight as to why it's important to ensure this population is educated, trained, skilled, and have the resources to get back on their feet. It not only helps them, but it also just helps our economic recovery as a whole. And here are just some key notes to think about for individuals that are incarcerated, students, or returning citizens. Higher education significantly reduces recidivism. Formerly incarcerated people who participate in post-secondary education programs are 48% less likely to be incarcerated again than those who do not. College graduation translates to higher wages. You saw that in the stats I showed earlier, but this also rings true for those who are justice impacted. And though a degree doesn't erase the stigma of a criminal record, it can shift an employer's focus from seeing the candidate as a liability and to see them as someone with potential. And so there are a lot of resources in Michigan for justice impacted individuals, but because I'm in the office of 60 by 30, I just wanted to share some programs that we have available right now. So for those who are currently incarcerated, they can actually take advantage of our Reconnect Scholarship, our Michigan Achievement Skill Scholarship, and our Reconnect Short-Term Training Grant Program. And those who are returning citizens, they can actually take advantage of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, the Michigan Achievement Skill Scholarship, the Michigan Reconnect Scholarship, and the Reconnect Short Training Grant Program. I won't go into details about each program. There should be a one-pager about these programs, but if not, I will be here and I'm happy to talk more about the programs or provide you with contact information or resources on each program. And that is it. Thank you.
I believe we do have the copy of that information in the back, so that is another handout that you're welcome to pick up and take with you when you leave. We'll save questions for the end. We'll try and ask all our speakers to stick around for any questions you might have, but we'll keep moving. And next is, Johnell Allen-Bey. I was kidding him about how many things he's involved with. I couldn't find all the logos. There were so many of them. But Johnell, please come on up and tell us your story.
Good afternoon. How's everyone? Good. Okay, don't seem like much energy in here. Let's get this energy up. You know, I like energy. So my name is Johnell Allen-Bey, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm an executive director for the Sheriff's Office in Genesee County. I'm also an entrepreneur. I own two major businesses in Genesee County, Reconnect My Life, which is mental health, and a daycare center, Ella Hughes Daycare and Learning Center. But the hat that I love the most is the one I wear for Nation Outside. I'm the coordinator for the city of Flint, a regional coordinator, let me get it right, for the Flint and Genesee County area. I've been involved in a lot of activity in the last 4.5 years. One of the greatest things is we've registered over 5,000 people to vote. We went into the jails and we were the first county to be recognized nationally at Good Morning America for our voting practices in 2020 election. we've done a lot to change policies and procedures for returning citizens. We're our state foundation and organization, but we're moving nationally. And why is that so important? Is because there are 80 million returning citizens in our country. 80 million. And I am a returning citizen. I'm a returning citizen. And March the 20th, 2018, I was released at 8:15 a.m. And when I walked out the building, the first thing I noticed that the air was a lot better on the other side. The second thing I noticed is that it was so much that I didn't know. And that I had a responsibility to those who I left behind and those who I represent in that 80 million to do everything possible daily to tear down barriers. And so one of the first barriers I had to tear down is the myth that felons couldn't vote. And it was a hard feat because most of us are, and I say us because I'm still a returning citizen for life. I can have my record expunged. I can have it clean slate, but I refuse to do that. I refuse it because I want to be able to be the spokesperson, to be able to tear that ceiling down and make sure that ones behind me get that opportunity. So my out date really is 2023, March the 20th. But because of the fact that I was smart enough to invest in myself through education and take advantage of education while I was incarcerated, I was granted good time. Good time. To the extent of 5 years. Now, had not that happened, I wouldn't stand here today before you. The accomplishments that God has given me the ability to accomplish wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been able to tell my story. I wouldn't have been able to have the impact in this society. And last night I got a text from Sheriff Swanson, which was very exciting and heartfelt. And he said like this here: the greatest thing that I've done since I've been sheriff was to hire 2 people that are returning citizens. I'm one of them. So when we talk about fair hiring, Genesee County has not only talked about it, but we've allowed our actions to show. I'm a full-time employee for the Genesee County Sheriff's Office. And a lot of responsibility. I'm not a police officer. But my job is to make sure that the community understands the training and be able to implement an educational program for the jail. Now, why is that important? 90% of our residents who go into jails go home. And it's been a revolving door for the last 200-some years. And we have to do something different. And education on the front end is something different. I run a program called I.G.N.I.T.E, Inmate Growth Naturally and Intentionally Through Education. But the transferring of the mind to the I changes to inmate to individual growth naturally and intentionally through education. And once that mindset turns into the individual, life changes, the mentality changes, value changes. All we're asking in this society is opportunity, an opportunity like the rest of the citizens, without barriers, without restrictions. Give us the opportunity, we can show you greatness. Without the opportunity, we're limited. and you force ones to be back in conditions where the mind is transferred, but physically they're not able to go anywhere. And so this means a lot to me when we talk about fair hiring. And next thing that we talk about is that if there's fair hiring, then that means that I'll be able to have a fair housing. I'll be able to have a fair life. I'll be able to do the things that other citizens who look different than me, those who look like me, and those who don't understand what I've been through, but will still be equally with an opportunity to be successful. So when we talk about good time, this is definitely dear to me. This is definitely something that's important to me. This is something that we need to be pushing for our state, because when we push this initiative, what it does is it'll make those 30,000 plus people who are incarcerated to invest in themselves, to get more education, to get certifications, not just because I'm going to get home early, because I'm able to hit the road running. Had I not had that opportunity, I couldn't have accomplished nothing. I couldn't even have been responsible for myself. And so every night when I go to sleep, I say two things. Thank you, God, for allowing me to be here, and thank you, God, for letting me be able to impact my people. Thank you.
Johnell has accomplished a lot in 5 years. Our next speaker is J.T. Weis. He's the CEO and owner of Abcor Industries, which is a wood products company on the west side of the state. And I think he's learned a secret about returning citizens that he wants to share with us.
Thank you, Jack. It's an honor to be invited here. Johnell, that was fantastic. Your great story. Pleasure to meet you. Anyways, I'll keep this fairly short. I wish I could give more time to Johnell, that's for sure. In 2011, I was running a group of companies for a guy named Warren Buffett. It was pretty significant. I had 5,000 people working for me, $500 million in revenue. And I sitting at dinner, I said, Christine, my wife, I said, I had a vision that on the last day I'm going to be at the gate, and there are going to be two guys sitting there and say, you know, Weis, we heard you believed. What did you actually do? And I told my wife, I said, this is, you know, making money is empty. I can't hire a re-entered citizen. And back then, I didn't even know it was called that. I said, I can't hire a convicted felon. I said, it's ridiculous. And so I told her, I said, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. So I found this company in Holland, Michigan. We powder coat wood, which is like, huh? You know, and it's a new material for the furniture industry. You know, it's 5 times more durable than wet coat paint and doesn't delaminate like laminate. So anyways, it's an interesting, very interesting little company. We had 7 employees when I bought it. We grew it to 90. 75% of my workforce are re-entered citizens. Of those 75, I'm energizing and sending those applause to the team. You know, it's been a phenomenal success. I've given more talks like this. I've had HR VPs from the biggest companies in the Midwest sit around saying, "Well, you must have a big HR team. Must have a lot of policy." I said, "You're looking at the HR department." You know, we have some simple strategies that are real simple on interviewing. You know, it's this concept of trust, you know, and we need some help from the state. So I don't know all the legislators who are sitting in here, but you got to continue to drive this reform that we've been doing. And thanks to people like John Cooper and Jack and lots of other people. I can go on and on with names, you know, people sitting here, you know. So Bernie Cry, so I spoke at Ionia. I've spoken quite a few times because Ionia is a prison near us. And I get letters from, after I go to, I get letters coming to the office, and I always respond. I just, I used to type out, have my assistant. I don't have a secretary, but she customer service, so she does a few things for me. And I used to type up a letter. It got too numerous, so I just write notes on the bottom of the same letter and send it back to the person who wrote the letter in prison. And they're asking for jobs. And I said, well, you can come here and interview. We'll give you an interview. Well, Bernie Kreis sent a letter, and I wrote in there, and he had wrote a note back to him, and he had been in for 50 years. And he went to the parole board after 7 times. He takes this letter that I had written, took me 30 seconds, and a stamp, puts it in front of the parole board. They look up and say, you're free to go, Mr. Kreis. So Bernie started with us. It's fantastic. I went to his wedding in August. Been with us for 3 years. My first paycheck to him, I handed to him, was his entire net worth. He had no Social Security. And he's been a phenomenal employee. There's lots of people like that at Abcor. We hire sex offenders. We don't even, that's not even part of the thing. There is no such thing as, hey, what's his dossier look like? We don't even ask or talk about that. What we want to know is where the guy's heart at and where his mind at, or her. We have women too. But a lot of male, because we're moving a lot of wood products. The physical work is heavy at times. So, it's really a biblical foundation for me. It's a personal thing. But yet, we are not a social services organization. We are a dynamic entrepreneurial company. We were named a top 50 company in the state of Michigan. And so this is proof that this policy can fully work for the entrepreneurial private sector, and it should not be looked at only as something that's driven by the public and some kind of social services only. That's not how this is going to work. It has to work on the public and the private side. And I've kind of howled into the ears. I really don't have a lot of fear. Into the ear of legislators for years now. Been very involved with the parole reform, expungement, So it's just an honor to be here, Jack. And the good time thing, it's just like, it's just common sense. I mean, it's really, you don't have to have a law degree to think about this. You don't need, So anyways, I think I've taken enough time. And I appreciate all of your consideration and all of your efforts in this, and we're going to continue driving in our little world. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we're going to have some policy ideas for any lawmakers or staffers in the room. I would like to introduce you to Peter Ruark from the Michigan League for Public Policy. Peter, come give us some good ideas.
Hi. So who has heard of Michigan League for Public Policy? Okay, good. That makes me feel good. So about half the room. Good. We are, make sure I've got this here. The League, just to tell you a little bit about our organization and then get to the good stuff, the League uses data to educate, advocate, and fight for policy solutions that undo historic and systemic racial and economic inequities to lift up Michiganders who have been left out of prosperity. That is our mission statement. The only thing I would change is I would use the word Michiganians, but that's just my preference. But that's what we do. We advocate on quite a few different policy areas in Michigan, budget, the state budget, job preparedness, K-12 education, tax and revenue, healthcare, public assistance, corrections, social determinants of health, workplace justice, and immigration. And that's a mouthful, and I don't do it all myself. So I'd like to, the reason, I'm just going to back up a little bit here. The reason I'm speaking here is Jack contacted me a few months ago and saw a paper we had done called Thriving on the Outside, How Michigan Can Help the Formerly Incarcerated Become Gainfully Employed. And he saw the short report we did, 8 pages, and said, we're having an event at Mackinac Center. Can you present on these recommendations and these findings? I said, I can, except this is a little bit outdated from 2019, but I'll do it anyway. And when I say outdated, I mean outdated in a good way, and we'll get to that. But in it, we talked a little bit about the challenges that are faced by returning citizens and just proposed some policy changes to address those. We looked at employer-side solutions, removing criminal history questions from job applications. That used to be called ban the box. I think the term that's more commonly used now is fair chance policies, fair chance hiring policies. There are some states, counties, and local jurisdictions that have adopted fair chance laws and ordinance that prohibit employers from including a question about past criminal convictions on the job application. And I get that, maybe there will be different opinions about that in this room, but what I would like to say is that there are a number of states that have such fair chance policies. Fair chance policies generally permit employers to ask the question further along in the hiring decision process, right? Because it's an employer's right to know about these things, especially if there are vulnerable populations that are being worked with. So, further along in the hiring decision process, such as during callbacks or interviews, and fair chance policies definitely do not preclude the employer from conducting a background check. So it's just talking about on the job application itself, so that at least someone who is otherwise, qualified, whose application otherwise would be appealing, could get their foot in the door and get an interview if that's where it's going to lead. Fair chance policies do not prohibit employers from considering an applicant's conviction in making the decision to hire, right? So it's just about the application. It's just about that question. Fair chance policies simply enable the returning citizen to get a foot in the door if the submitted application looks otherwise favorable to the employer. So 11 states and the District of Columbia currently have statewide fair chance laws or policies covering all private and public sector employment. Outside of those states, 18 cities and counties across the United States have adopted fair chance policies covering private employment. So the situation in Michigan is private employers are allowed to include questions on their application asking about felony and even misdemeanor convictions. So there are no laws, in Michigan governing that. But we made some progress. Governor Snyder removed from all the state government applications by executive order. He removed that question from all state government employment applications. So in effect, the state of Michigan has fair chance hiring policies. When you apply for a job in the state of Michigan, for the state of Michigan, to work for the state of Michigan as a public employee, you do not get that question on your application. And the governor also encouraged county and local governments to follow suit. Now, currently, Michigan law prohibits cities and counties from banning conviction history questions on private employment applications. In other words, cities and counties can remove it from their own public employee applications, but they can't require private employers to remove that question. It's called local preemption. I'm not in favor of it. Here's some Michigan cities and counties with fair chance hiring policies. As we said in the left column, private employers, cities and counties are preempted from requiring private employers to do it, but Ann Arbor, Detroit, East Lansing, Genesee County, Kalamazoo, and Muskegon County have all taken that question off their public employment applications. Detroit and Kalamazoo have gone further and also required vendors who are contracting with their governments to take that question off. There are other solutions too that we recommended. Expungement. Well, guess what? That's what makes this report out of date. Because on October 13 of 2020, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law a package of bills, and the numbers are there if you want to look them up, a package of bills that would enable a process by which people who have been formerly incarcerated can get that expunged from their records. So we made some progress, and this was truly something to celebrate. There's one more thing that that is recommended in this piece that we hope will be put into place, and that is to remove boilerplate language in the appropriation for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services that requires the department to deny assistance to applicants with more than one felony ban on their records. So we made half progress on that. Right now, if you qualify for food assistance in Michigan, you will not be denied that food assistance because of having more than one drug felony. That was just in the last couple years, December 30 of 2020, when that was signed into law. But we still have to get that off the eligibility for cash assistance. If somebody needs temporary cash assistance and otherwise qualifies, then we do not believe that having more than one drug felony on their record should prevent them from getting that assistance they need. Because as we all know, people who are trying to reintegrate into society, and remember this temporary cash assistance is for families with children, right? So, you know, somebody comes home after doing their time, you know, they need to be able to, if they are in bad shape financially, they need to be able to get that cash assistance and not have that prevent it. So that's what I've got for you, and thank you for letting me speak.
I'm sure, great ideas. I'm sure you have more. So please connect with Peter after the program. The next and last speaker of the day is Joe Haveman. Joe spoke before us last year, and it was so energetic. I wanted him to come back and really tie a knot around this thing for us all. So Joe, please.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for everyone being here today. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your mission to help those people that we are here to serve. So today I just want to, as Jack said, tie a rope around it. You've heard the experts talking about employment. We know that the data is there, and we're not just helping the people coming out of prison get jobs. We're helping this economy. We're helping our communities grow stronger. We know the pragmatic reasons for doing it. So today I want to leave you with, I love quotes. I kind of do everything in quotes. When I see one I like, I put it in my phone. I have a whole list of them. I'm going to leave you with 3 quotes today and tell a little story about one of them. We're going to talk about how to go about talking to your legislator, and then we're going to talk about why we do this. And I got to figure this machine out. Hey, there it is. My first quote of the day. Milton Friedman said it's nice to elect the right people, but that's not the way we solve things. The way to solve things is by making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. Now that's very depressing. That is not the way democracy should work, but I think it's true. And as you go talk to your legislator and your senator, when you talk to the governor's office, make sure that you meet them on their terms. Not every legislator is here to do the good of the people. There are many people that come to this town, and I served with them, and I know a lot of good people that I served with and a lot of good people that are here now. But they're, in the back of their mind, they're constantly looking at their next leadership position, their next election. They're looking at the Senate, they're looking at Congress, they're looking at what their constituents back home are saying, or a primary. And their motivation isn't always about what's right for the citizens of Michigan. So I'd encourage you to find out who your legislators are, but also why they're here, what their background is, and how you can meet them on their terms, and how you can help them become the people they want to be by doing what we need them to do. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. All right. Yeah, that went well. All right. Thank you. I want to talk about why we do this. And I've got two quotes for you I want to share. Years ago, I was up north on a long weekend with my wife, and I walked into a store, and letting my wife shop as I just roamed around, I caught a quote written on the wall of this retail store, and it kind of just hit me. The idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that's wrong with the world. A guy named Paul Farmer said that. I Googled him. Paul Farmer's an anthropologist. I don't know who he is. I can't spell anthropologist. But the quote is just so thought-provoking. And as you come to this town, the other thing you're going to realize is that we are really good at dividing ourselves in this town and in this country. We've become experts in this country of figuring out how we can divide ourselves more into smaller groups and into deciding who's more important than whom. And as this says, no lives are less important than others. And you can look at black and white, you can look at male and female, rich and poor, east versus west, urban, rural. We always represent the people who we think are going to serve our needs, and we make them more important. And I encourage you, when you're talking to your your legislators, that you remind them of this, that they are here to represent 10 million people. They may be elected by 90,000, they may be elected by 250,000, but they are here to serve 10 million. And none of them are more important than another. Those people that we see in prison, and I found this the first day that I walked into my first prison and looked at men and met people that, you know what, where by the grace of God, it were me. And they were just a little more unfortunate than I was. And their value in God's eyes is no less than God's value for me or you. So one more quote, and this one comes from the Bible and a little story that goes with it. I don't have this up on the screen. I think it was like 12 years ago this month when I was serving, I got a phone call from Prison Fellowship, and they asked me to come on a trip and with them and go to Minnesota. Now, we're going to get about 3 inches today. I understand it's February in Michigan. No worse place to be than Michigan. They took me to Minnesota in February. And I remember a couple of us commenting, you couldn't find a prison in Hawaii, but we drove to Lansing. A few of us got on an airplane. We flew to Minnesota. And it was Craig DeRoche, former Speaker of the House, who was working for Prison Fellowship at the time, a good friend of mine who used to work for Prison Fellowship named Mary Engel, Russ Marlin, who works for the department, Deputy Director, and a guy named Onesimus Burrell. He was chaplain for the Muskegon prison. And I remember, doing the handshake and meet and greet and everything, and I said, hi, I'm Joe Haveman, state rep from Ottawa County. And Onesimus says, I am Onesimus Burrell. chaplain in Muskegon. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't catch how you pronounced your name. He said, well, it's Onesimus. It's a biblical name. Don't worry about it. Call me Burrell. And he must have said that to people 1,000 times in his life, because I still can't spell it. I can pronounce it after about 10 years of knowing him. Does anybody know Onesimus? I'm a little surprised with this group that, pardon me?
Was he a prisoner?
He's chaplain, former chaplain, retired chaplain out of Muskegon. So, great guy. Now, today, move up 10 years, 12 years, I serve on the board for Humanity for Prisoners. Onesimus is on the board with me. Finally, like I said, got to be able to pronounce his name. Was on a Zoom call about 2 months ago with him and a bunch of people, and as I typically do with Zoom, I got multiple screens, and I'm watching my Zoom, and then I'm playing on Facebook or doing something else over here. Come on, you all do it. So it occurred to me as I see his face and his name up there, hey, he reminded me that that name came out of the Bible. So Google Onesimus, and sure enough, 2 Timothy, and it comes up, and I'm trying to pay attention and reading at the same time, and I got to share this with you because this just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm not kidding you. I got choked up when I read this, but it's so cool. Paul's second letter to Timothy. He says, may the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesimus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. On the contrary, when he was in Rome, he searched me out and found me. May the Lord grant him and find him mercy. He wasn't ashamed of my chains. Sorry. That just hit me. Here's a guy 2,000 years ago, Onesimus, and by coincidence, I don't believe in coincidence, these parents in Muskegon, Michigan, named their son Onesimus, who becomes a chaplain in our prison system. Just kind of cool. So, as you go to your legislator, as you talk to your legislator, I want you to remind them the idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that's wrong with the world. 2,000 years ago, a guy, Onesimus, knew that. A guy in Muskegon named Onesimus knows that, and all of you in this room know that. Thank you.
All right, I wanted to save room for questions here. So let's do that. Let's open it up. I have a microphone here, a wireless mic. So if there's any questions, I'm going to hand this to one of my trusted helpers. Is this working okay? Fantastic. Can somebody walk this microphone around the room? Oh, thank you. If there's any questions, raise your hand.
Oh, I didn't know I was going to be first. I have a question about the gentleman who's talking about hiring people who are out of prison. Has anyone thought about the idea, the policy person I guess I'm thinking of, has anyone thought of the idea of maybe granting under a fairness statute immunity to private employers when they hire? Because I think the reason there's that exception for private employers is because there's probably a concern and fear by private employers that if they hire somebody that has a record and something goes wrong, which could happen with anybody essentially, but they could be sued civilly for hiring somebody that has a record, particularly if there's any violence involved. Has that ever been discussed?
These microphones also should be working if you need it.
Oh, okay.
Double check.
Can you hear me? Okay. We absolutely want employers to not be penalized for doing the right thing, right? So I don't know a whole lot about the nitty-gritty of that issue, but I do know that in the past, there have been bills proposed that have addressed immunity. Just as a policy guy, I would say we would need to get that right. We would need to devise those very carefully so that there aren't unintended consequences through that. But certainly we wouldn't want to see employers penalized for hiring people who have been through the
Well, the reason I say that is because the government, it's easier for the government to put policies and law in effect like that because there's governmental immunity. So if you can grant something similar as an incentive for employers,
yeah.
like the gentleman over there, on the other end, it makes it more palatable and more likely they're going to hire somebody. That's true in housing too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why we have so many homeless people in this country, 750,000 on any given night sleeping in streets. They can't get into housing. Many of them have prison records, jail records, mental health problems, substance abuse. We know who the populations are. So
Yeah.
it's an immunity issue for the person trying to grant the employment and maybe the housing too.
Yeah. So I guess my advice would be, to see what's been proposed in the past and maybe. Well,
If I could,
maybe Joe can speak to.
yeah, I'm going back 10 years now, but
Yeah.
I believe the department has something in place already for certain prisoners that complete a certification. Maybe Jayshona knows something about this, but I thought there was a certificate that a prisoner could receive that would allow that private employer some kind of relief if there were a suit. So if it's, I might have half of it wrong there, but we looked into this when I was here, and the department has something in place. So maybe it needs education and it needs to be upgraded.
Yeah, it might be a policy, a limited policy, but the statute is where the real power is. Because it doesn't, policies get changed from administration to administration. But a statute is.
But when I asked about it back when Snyder was governor, it had been in place for a while. So I think it's, maybe it's Director Washington, staff has to re-educate us on what is there, and then it has to be, brought into current.
Also, the same things with housing. I mean, if you've got employment and you can't get a place to live because you got a record, that puts your employment at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know where you were going. Is it Paula? Yeah, so, yes, many of the larger corporations have a lot of fear of being sued. This is one of the main drivers in which they're trying to create all of this internal human resource policy, and it's difficult. I don't know if immunity for this is going to be a law that ever could get passed. I think that'd be a tough one, because we as employers have some responsibilities to the society as well, and how a law like that might be written, it could be problematic. But I mean, it is a very good point about creating some, if it's tort reform, is that the right? Yeah, I mean, what was that, Joe? Protection. Yeah, protections. To loosen it up. So it's an interesting thought.
We have a governmental liability statute in Michigan that allows the government to raise governmental immunity. There's ways around it if it's gross and horrific and things like that. It could just match what the government has in terms of that limited area of hiring people.
Yeah.
We need to have you speaking to any of the legislators and lawmakers in the room.
Stand up.
Were there other questions? I saw a hand up earlier.
Could I ask how many are in here?
My name's Emily Devendorf, representative out of Lansing, and you're welcome to meet with me about this anytime in the future. I'm very interested in working on this.
Are you the only rep here?
Representative Hoskins was here before, and he just stepped out.
I'm Donnie Steele. I'm a representative as well.
Okay, great. So we don't have to many though, right?
Oh, there's
Representative Wozniak.
yeah.
Who is, I'd like to see my rep from the Grand Blanc area. I don't see him here. So I'm going to be talking to him.
Is there anybody else who has a question? Thank you for your question.
Dennis?
This question is to Ms. Hicks. These programs that you have for that are open to persons personally incarcerated, what class of incarcerated people are permitted by MDOC to participate in those programs?
I'm trying to think. I believe they have to be close to their release date. But I don't know by like how many days. I can say, speaking for the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, we are comfortable with whomever that is in the criminal justice system to participate. Doesn't matter in terms of their offense or when they will be released. But I know for MDOC, they have prioritized it where it depends on if they're closer to their release date. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but happy to reach out to the department and follow up with you with the exact release date of when they would be able to qualify.
That's a real issue right there, and I think the gentleman who spoke first somehow was able to get around that and qualify for an earlier release date, because earlier than that, he did get involved in one of those programs. And I know a lot of prisoners are just sitting on their thumbs, just looking for something to do, and they're not allowed to get into rehabilitative programs because they're not close enough to the end of the sentence.
Sure.
Yeah, what's the governor doing about maybe funding those programs a little more heftily? He makes a good point.
What is the governor doing in terms of funding our programs?
No, I mean funding what the gentleman brought up about educational programs or programs to help the prisoners before they get right up to the time. I mean, you've got people sitting there for sometimes decades. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah. I want to be considerate of everyone's time. We have approached the hour, and if someone needs to leave, I understand. If there's folks that want to stay on and continue the discussion, that's great, but it's just after 1 o'clock, so if you have to go, I understand. But I do want to make a couple of comments in kind of a closing manner here, though. What I'm really hoping today is that we've given people some policy ideas, policies that will recognize that once someone pays their debt to society, the debt is paid, okay? Recognize, incentivize, and encourage those who have changed their lives for the better after having been incarcerated. Let's recognize that, right? And then let's demonstrate that citizens with a criminal record are not damaged goods, but in fact some of the best workers that an employer can hire once given a fair chance. And then finally, recognize, incentivize, and reward those employers who wish to explore and implement fair chance hiring practices. That's what we want. So with that, again, you're invited to stay. Please ask questions if you want, maybe individually if the folks are still available. There's a lot of food back there, I think, still. Please take some with you. And thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it.